welcome to our deep dive today
Yeah.
into the Bitcoin white paper.
Ooh, exciting.
I think you're probably already familiar with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
at least by name,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to go beyond the headlines today.
Okay.
Straight to the source to see how this whole thing actually works.
It's a fascinating document, isn't it?
It is fascinating.
That's incredible
Yeah.
how much it foreshadowed.
And to think it all started with this one
Mm-hmm.
relatively short document.
Right.
Okay, so the white paper is divided into 12 sections.
Okay.
We're going to distill the key insights from each,
Right.
but not necessarily in order.
Okay.
We're going to follow the logic of the ideas themselves.
Yeah, sounds good. So,
Why don't we start by looking at the problem Satoshi was trying to solve?
right. I think a lot of people assume Bitcoin was all about disrupting banks
Mhm.
or creating a new kind of money,
Yeah,
but it's more nuanced than that.
exactly. Satoshi's real focus was on enabling online transactions.
Especially smaller, more casual ones,
Right.
without needing to trust a third party,
Okay.
like a bank or a credit card company.
That idea of trust, or rather eliminating the need for it,
Right.
is really at the core of Bitcoin, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that leads us to one of the most fundamental challenges addressed in the white paper.
Okay.
The double spend problem.
Sure.
You know, the possibility of copying digital information and spending the same coin twice.
Right. In the physical world, you can't spend the same dollar bill twice.
Right.
But with digital information, copying is easy.
Yeah.
So how do you prevent that kind of fraud online without a central authority
Right.
to keep track of everything?
That's where the idea of a timestamp server comes in.
Oh,
It's a concept that predates Bitcoin,
okay.
but was cleverly adapted by Satoshi.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it's a way to prove that a piece of data existed at a specific point in time
Okay.
in a way that can't be tampered with.
So it's like a digital notary verifying the existence and the timing of a document. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And Satoshi proposed using a chain of these timestamp blocks,
Right.
each linked cryptographically to the one before it.
Yeah.
This is the foundation of the blockchain.
Okay, so we have these blocks of data chained together,
Right.
forming a chronological record of transactions.
Yes.
But who's responsible for creating these blocks and adding them to the chain?
That's where we get to the concept of mining.
Right.
Remember, Satoshi wanted to eliminate the need for a central authority.
Right.
So the white paper proposes a decentralized, competitive process.
Right. I've always been curious about mining.
Yeah.
On the surface, it seems so energy intensive, almost wasteful. Why design it this way?
That's a common question.
Yeah.
And one that's still debated today. But for Satoshi, it was crucial to create a system that was secure and resistant to manipulation
Okay.
without relying on any single entity.
Right.
So the white paper describes a process where anyone can participate in mining these blocks.
They compete to solve complex mathematical puzzles. And the first one to solve it gets to add their block to the chain.
And that's what proof of work is all about, right?
Exactly.
Proving that you've invested the computational effort to find the solution.
Exactly. And this competition is crucial.
Yeah.
The miners are incentivized to act honestly because they're rewarded with Bitcoin for their efforts.
Right.
But more importantly, it makes the system incredibly difficult to attack.
So the more computational power is invested in mining, the more secure the network becomes.
Precisely.
Right.
It becomes exponentially harder for a malicious actor to try to rewrite the blockchain or double spend coins
Okay.
because they would need to outcompete the combined effort of all the honest miners.
That makes sense. But what about people who just want to use Bitcoin? Do they need to run these powerful mining rigs?
No, thankfully not.
Okay.
The white paper also introduces the concept of simplified payment verification,
Okay.
or SPV. It's a way for lightweight wallets to verify transactions without having to download the entire blockchain.
So SPV allows you to participate in the network
Right.
without needing to store the entire transaction history.
Yeah.
That's pretty ingenious, right?
It essentially allows you to verify a specific transaction
Okay.
by tracing it back to its block in the chain, confirming its validity without needing to store all the data.
That's really clever.
Yeah.
It addresses a potential scalability issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered how the blockchain works, the role of miners, and the concept of SPV. Now I want to get into something that's always been a bit of a puzzle for me.
Yeah.
Privacy in Bitcoin.
It's one of those aspects that people often misunderstand.
Okay.
The white paper does acknowledge the need for privacy
Right.
while maintaining transparency on the network.
Right, because all transactions are recorded on the blockchain,
Yeah.
but they're not directly linked to real-world identities.
That's right.
Okay.
Transactions are associated with public keys.
Which are like pseudonyms.
Right.
It's not truly anonymous, but it does offer a degree of privacy.
But in practice, hasn't that anonymity been eroded somewhat
Yeah.
with the rise of exchanges and regulations?
That's a valid point. The landscape has changed significantly
Yeah.
since the white paper was published.
Yeah.
Maintaining privacy in the Bitcoin ecosystem now requires additional steps.
So it's a constantly evolving situation. Fascinating.
It is.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one more thing I want to explore before we move on.
Okay.
The idea of someone trying to attack the network.
Right.
How does the white paper address that concern?
That's where the math gets really interesting.
Okay.
The white paper goes into some detailed calculations about the probability of an attacker successfully manipulating the blockchain.
Okay. Math isn't exactly my forte.
Sure.
But I'm all ears. What's the gist of it?
Well, imagine an attacker trying to create a fraudulent version of the blockchain, longer than the honest one.
To double spend coins or rewrite history.
Okay.
Every time a new block is added to the honest chain, the attacker has to catch up.
Right.
Which requires a huge amount of computational power.
So it's a race against time, essentially.
Yeah.
The longer the honest chain grows, the harder it becomes for the attacker to overtake it.
Exactly. And the white paper uses a gambling analogy to illustrate this.
Okay.
Imagine a game of chance where the attacker needs to keep winning to stay in the game.
Right.
Every new block on the honest chain is like another loss for the attacker, making their chances of ultimately winning increasingly slim.
So it's like trying to win a lottery.
Right.
Where the odds keep getting worse with every ticket someone else buys.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the white paper goes into the specific calculations showing how the probability of a successful attack drops dramatically as the honest chain grows longer.
Okay, so the system is designed to make it practically impossible for an attacker to take over. But what about individual transactions? Let's say I receive a payment in Bitcoin. How long do I need to wait before I can be confident that the transaction can't be reversed?
That's where the concept of confirmations comes in.
Okay.
When you receive a Bitcoin payment, it's initially included in a new block, but the more blocks that are added on top of that block, the more secure your transaction becomes.
So it's like layers of protection. Each new block adds another layer of certainty that the transaction is valid.
Exactly.
And can't be tampered with.
And the white paper suggests waiting for a certain number of confirmations.
Okay.
Depending on the value of the transaction and your desired level of security.
Right.
6 confirmations is often considered the industry standard.
Okay.
Providing a very high degree of confidence.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot more secure. But let's switch gears for a moment.
Yeah.
We've been talking about individual coins being transferred, but I'm curious about how transactions actually work in practice.
Right.
The white paper mentions something about combining and splitting value. What does that mean?
It's a little more complex than just sending whole coins back and forth.
Okay.
In reality, transactions often involve breaking down and recombining amounts.
Okay.
It's similar to how you might use different denominations of physical currency to make a purchase.
So it's like paying for a $5 coffee with a $10 bill and getting $5 in change.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
A Bitcoin transaction can have multiple inputs,
Okay.
which are the coins you're spending, and multiple outputs, which include the payment to the recipient and any change returned to you.
Okay, so it's not just one-to-one transfers. It's more like a flexible accounting system.
Yeah.
Where different amounts can be combined and split as needed.
Precisely. This flexibility is what makes Bitcoin practical for everyday transactions.
Okay.
And it's all managed through the clever use of cryptography and the rules of the blockchain.
This is really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm starting to appreciate the elegance and complexity of the system that Satoshi outlined in the white paper.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But I have another question. With all these transactions happening all the time, doesn't the blockchain just keep growing infinitely?
Right.
Wouldn't that eventually become a problem in terms of storage space?
That's an important consideration, and the white paper addresses it with a solution called the Merkle tree.
A tree?
A tree.
Okay, this sounds intriguing.
Oh.
How does a tree help with managing blockchain data?
Think of it as a way to organize and summarize the information in each block.
Okay.
Imagine a tree where each leaf represents a transaction.
Right.
The branches connect these transactions in pairs, and those pairs are connected again all the way up to a single root that represents the entire block.
Okay, I'm visualizing.
Okay, good.
But how does this help with storage?
Well, the Merkle tree allows for something called pruning.
Pruning?
Once a transaction is buried deep enough in the blockchain,
Yeah.
its details can be safely removed from a node's local copy of the blockchain without affecting the integrity of the overall system.
So you're saying that nodes don't need to store every single detail of every transaction forever.
Yeah.
They can essentially trim the tree
Right.
while still maintaining a secure record of everything.
That's the idea.
That's really clever.
Yeah, it can save a significant amount of disk space, making it more practical for nodes to run and participate in the network.
That's really clever.
Okay.
It seems like Satoshi thought of everything, didn't he?
He or she or they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to touch on one more topic before we move on.
Okay.
Privacy. We talked earlier about how transactions are linked to public keys,
Yes.
not real-world identities.
Right.
But how does the white paper address the potential tension between transparency and privacy?
It's a delicate balance. On the one hand, the transparent nature of the blockchain is crucial for security and accountability. But on the other hand, there are legitimate concerns about privacy.
Yeah.
Especially as the use of Bitcoin has evolved.
Right, because while the white paper emphasizes pseudonymity, the reality is that with the rise of exchanges and KYC regulations, it's become more difficult to maintain true anonymity in the Bitcoin ecosystem.
That's true, and this has led to ongoing debates and innovations within the Bitcoin community, exploring ways to enhance privacy while preserving the core principles of the system.
So it's an area where the original vision of the white paper has been challenged by real-world developments leading to further innovation.
Absolutely, and it highlights the fact that Bitcoin, like any technology, is constantly evolving.
This has been an incredible journey so far. We've covered so much ground.
It has.
But there's one aspect of the white paper I still want to explore in more detail.
Okay.
The idea of combining and splitting value in transactions.
Right.
It's a concept that seems both technical and fundamental to how Bitcoin works in practice.
It is. Yeah, it really is. It's a concept that often trips people up.
Yeah. So let's imagine for a second we're trying to buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin.
Okay.
And the coffee costs, let's say, 0.003 Bitcoin.
Okay.
But in my wallet, I only have Bitcoin in units of like 0.001 and 0.005.
Okay.
So how do I make that payment?
You would use both of those Bitcoin units as inputs to the transaction.
So that's 0.006 total going into the transaction?
Yeah, and the protocol would then create two outputs.
Okay.
One output would be for the 0.003 Bitcoin that goes to the coffee shop.
Right, to pay for the coffee.
And the second output would be for the remaining 0.0003.
Okay, as change.
As change back to your wallet.
So it all balances out.
Exactly.
No Bitcoin is created or destroyed.
It's just rearranged.
It's just rearranged.
Kind like making change with physical currency.
Got it.
But on the blockchain.
Okay, that makes sense. So when we look at a transaction on a block explorer, we might see multiple inputs and multiple outputs.
Yeah, it's not always as simple as just one Bitcoin going from one address to another.
Got it. This is really interesting stuff, I have to say.
It's a very elegant system.
Yeah. But I have another question.
Sure.
What about the fees? What are those all about?
Good question. The fees are essentially a way to incentivize the miners to include your transaction in a block.
So it's like a tip.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
For the miner.
Yeah, the higher the fee you're willing to pay,
the
more likely your transaction is to be included quickly.
Okay, so it's like a bidding system in a way.
Kind of, yeah. During times of high network activity, transactions with higher fees tend to get prioritized.
Makes sense, but how are these fees determined? Is there like a set price list?
Not exactly. It's more dynamic than that.
Okay.
The fees are influenced by factors like the size of the transaction and the overall congestion on the network.
So it's a bit like surge pricing you see with ride-sharing apps.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay, so the fees can fluctuate depending on demand.
Right, and you can usually choose to pay a higher fee if you want faster confirmation.
Gotcha. So it's a trade-off between speed and cost.
Exactly.
This is all starting to make a lot more sense now. I feel like I'm really getting a handle on how Bitcoin transactions actually work.
I'm glad to hear it. It's not always the easiest stuff to wrap your head around.
No, it's definitely complex,
but
you're doing a great job of explaining it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So where do you want to go from here?
Well, we've talked about the mechanics of transactions.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious about the bigger picture, the implications of this technology.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, the white paper talks about Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Right.
But it's become so much more than that.
It hasn't. It's been used as an investment.
Right.
A store of value, a way to transfer money across borders.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see how it's evolved beyond its original purpose.
It speaks to the power of open innovation.
Yeah, I mean, Satoshi released this white paper into the world and then essentially stepped back.
Right. It's been a community-driven project from the start.
And it's amazing to see how the community has taken those initial ideas and run with them.
It really is a testament to the power of decentralization.
Okay, so we've talked about the evolution of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect I want to touch on.
Sure.
And that is the role of miners.
Okay.
They're essential to the functioning of this system.
They're the ones who secure the network.
But there's also been a lot of controversy surrounding mining.
Right. Primarily around the energy consumption.
Yeah, it's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is. There are valid concerns about the environmental impact.
Yeah.
But there are also arguments that the benefits of Bitcoin outweigh the costs.
And there are ongoing efforts to make mining more sustainable.
Absolutely, like the transition to renewable energy sources.
Right, and the development of more efficient mining hardware.
It's definitely an area to watch closely as Bitcoin continues to grow.
This has been a really insightful conversation so far.
It has been. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, but there's one more thing I want to explore.
Okay, what's that?
The concept of combining and splitting value in transactions.
Right. It's a key part of how Bitcoin works in practice.
And I think it's worth diving into a little deeper. Okay, so we're talking about combining and splitting value in Bitcoin transactions.
Right. It's a little bit like, imagine you're at a store.
Okay.
And you want to buy something that costs, let's say, $7.
Okay.
But you only have a $10 bill.
Right.
You can't just tear the $10 bill in half to pay the exact amount.
No, of course not.
So what do? You
give the cashier the $10 bill.
Right, and they give you back $3 and change.
Exactly.
Bitcoin transactions work in a similar way.
Okay, I'm starting to see the analogy here.
Yeah, so instead of physical bills, you have these digital units of Bitcoin.
Right.
And when you want to make a payment that doesn't exactly match the units you have,
Yeah.
you combine multiple inputs to create the desired amount.
So it's like putting together different combinations of bills and coins.
Exactly, and then the protocol creates multiple outputs.
Love it.
One output goes to the recipient to cover the cost of the purchase.
Right.
And any remaining value is sent back to you as change.
So it's all about balancing the equation.
Precisely, no Bitcoin is created or destroyed in the process.
Got it. So it's like a digital version of making change.
That's a great way to put it.
This is really fascinating stuff, I have to say.
It is. It's one of the things that makes Bitcoin so unique.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of thinking about transactions.
It is, but once you understand the logic, it's actually quite elegant.
I'm starting to appreciate that elegance now.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has been, and we've covered a lot.
We really got into the weeds of the Bitcoin white paper.
We did, from the basics of the blockchain to the intricacies of transactions and mining.
And I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn.
Absolutely. But for our listeners who are new to Bitcoin, hopefully this deep dive has given them a solid foundation.
I hope so.
To understand how this groundbreaking technology works.
It's a fascinating subject.
It really is, and it's one that continues to evolve.
Absolutely. The world of Bitcoin is constantly changing and innovating.
So stay tuned for more deep dives in the future.
We'll be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.